In this video, we will talk about solving quadratic equation by completing the square. Let's have a look. Now, the first thing that we need to pay attention would be always making sure the quadratic equation is in general form. Let's have a look on this. X squared minus 2x minus 9. So this is in general form. So when we talk about general form, make sure you remember that the general form for quadratic equation would be ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. That is quadratic equations. Just to remind and recap, a quick recap, a is the coefficient for x squared, is a constant. B is the coefficient for x, and c is the constant, the only constant. So for every quadratic equations, we will have the value for a, b, c. So in this case, we will have a equals to 1, b equals to negative 2, and c equals to negative 9. Alright, so this is the first step, making sure it's in general form. Now step number 2 is we must make sure the a or the coefficient for x squared must be 1 in order to complete the square. So in this case, it is 1. We can skip step number 2. Alright, so we work on step number 3. Okay, step number 3 would be we will put something in between bx and also c. So this is how we write onto it. X squared minus 2x minus 9 equals to 0. We will put something in between bx and c. What are we going to put? That is step number 3. We are going to put b over 2 square minus b over 2 square. You put something and you take it back so that it is balanced, right? So that it is balanced. And b refer to the value of negative 2 in this case. Okay, so if we have negative 2 as the b, so we are putting in negative 2 over 2 square minus negative 2 over 2 square. Okay, and you can simplify it what's within the brackets. So when you have negative 2 divided by 2, and this part as well, negative 2 divided by 2, that would be negative 1, right? So we have negative 1 and negative 1. Alright? Okay, so the next step will be pay attention to the first 3 terms. The first 3 terms. We will complete the square. Okay, we will do a factorization. We are turning these 3 terms into a perfect square. So a perfect square, we will put a big bracket, perfect squares, that will be a square. And what do you put in the bracket would be, always remember this way. We are putting in, definitely, it must be x. So in this case, unknown is x, so we put in x. And then what's inside of this brackets? So we have negative 1. So this is how you write and express it into a perfect square. And then what comes after these 3 terms, including the negative sign, you just tabulate this using calculator. In this case, how many do you have? You have negative 1 minus none. Okay, you have negative 10 equals to 0. So since it's completing a square, the best way is to figure out the value of x is to move this part, right? We can move negative 10 to the other side so that you have 0 plus 10 equals to x minus 1 square. So you have bracket x minus 1 square equals to 10. And then to figure out the next step, square, you bring over. When you bring over square to the other side, we will have x minus 1 without the brackets equals to square root 10. Make sure you remember whenever you square If we put a square root on a certain value, that will be positive and negative values. Okay, so the last step, since we have a positive one, so we have 1 plus negative 10, figure out in your calculator, and another one would be 1 minus square root 10. Okay, you can put this into your calculator. So what do we have? 1 plus square root 10. You can put it into a third form, or else just put in decimal point. 4 than 162. Another one would be negative 2.162. That will be your answer. Okay. If you think third form is too complicated, of course you can figure out square root 10. Okay. You can write aside. You know that square root 10 equals to 3.163. You can turn it into a decimal first. Okay. That is the final answer. Finding the value of x by completing the square. So always remember, the first step is to make sure you arrange it in general form, ax squared plus bx plus c. The second step is making sure a equals to 1. If it's not, then you probably have to divide the whole equation by a certain value. And then followed by adding in b over 2, meaning half of the b value, and then you square it, minus the same thing again, and then you put into a perfect square form. I'm going to show you one more. Okay, this one. Okay, this one, my first question to you, is it arranged in general form? No. So probably you have to arrange in a general form. So when you arrange to it, then I have negative x squared. It is still negative because I didn't change the sign, it's still the same sign. And you have plus, because nothing by default it is positive, minus 4 equals to 0. So this is in general form. However, look at step number 2. We figure out first what is the ABC in this case. Okay, maybe. So first, this is in general form. All right. Now we look at the A now. The A is negative 1, right? Negative 1. And then B equals 8 and C is negative 4. So pay attention here. A is negative 1. So you have to do something about it. So we are going to turn negative 1 into 1 by multiplying negative 1. Or you can bring them to the right hand side. It will be positive 1 for A. And that will be x squared, turning all the sign, opposite sign. So you have x squared minus 8x plus 4 equals to 0. Okay, now your A equals to 1. Check. Okay, remember the third step, b over 2 square and minus b over 2 square. That is the third step. Let's see what can we do about this. So make sure you remember it is between bx and c. So right after the x, right after bx, then you put something into it. So we have x squared minus 8x plus 4. Okay, maybe we need more space on it, equals to 0. So this is the part we put in. B over 2 minus b over 2 squared. Since we know that b is actually negative 8, so you know what to put in here, right? You put in negative 8 and negative 8. So in this case, if you simplify it, you know that you have a negative 4 squared minus negative 4 squared plus 4 equals to 0. Okay? Alright, this is the part that most of you cannot memorize the steps of it, which is the first three terms we'll put into a perfect square form. Okay, so these three terms was factorized, then we turn into a perfect square. So perfect square, definitely you have a square. Remember, I told you, since the unknown is x, x squared. So the first one must be x, followed by what's written in the bracket. So we have x minus 4 squared, and then this part you leave it to your calculator. Okay, so we have minus negative 4 squared plus 4. You should have negative 12 equals to 0. And then since you need to find the value of x, you are going to move part by part. Of course, I'm moving this part, which is outside of the brackets, to the other side. So I will have plus 12 here. So we have x minus 4 bracket square equals to 12, 0 plus 12, and then followed by a square roots, a square. When you move it to the other side, you have a square root. So we have square root 12. Remember? Plus and minus, right? Plus and minus. So your answer should be 4 plus square root 12 or 4 minus square root 12. Or you can figure out the decimal number here first. It's up to you. Okay? So we have 4 plus square root 12. Third form, let's change to decimal. We have 7.464, four significant figure, and we have 0.5359. Right. So these are the answer for x. Okay. So one more example with this one. Okay. Now the first thing, what do we need to check? We need to check whether it is in general form. Is it? Ax squared plus bx plus c. Yep, this is in general form. The second step is a equals to 1, a equals to 6, not 1. So what you need to do here is, how do you turn 6 to be 1? You can only multiply and divide. So divide everything by 6. So if we divide everything by 6, then x squared minus 7 over 6x, right? Minus 3 over 6, which is 1 over 2. And 0 divided by 6, 0. Then now a equals to 1. Okay, so more things and more steps to go on. Okay, then the third one is plus b over 2 square and minus b over 2 square. And where do we put after x? Between bx and c. So we have x squared minus 7 over 6x plus b over 2 square. Oh, I should just leave it in green color. So b over 2 square minus b over 2 square. And the situation here will be a bit different. Why? Because your b is not a whole number. It's a fraction. So if you were to put into here, that will be hard to understand, right? So when you have fraction like this, I want you to understand as if this part is the same as you have negative 7 over 6, your b, half of the value. So divided by 2. Okay, meaning it's the same as times 1 over 2. So in this case, half of the b value, that will be, you can get this from a calculator, 7 over 12. And you do the same thing over here, negative 7 over 12. Okay, nice. And then now, remember, we are changing the first three terms into a big bracket, perfect square. Always start with x because the unknown is in x now. And then what's written in the bracket over here. So we have x minus 7 over 12. Okay, and this is the part where you leave everything into your calculator. So make sure you type in correctly, negative 7 over 12. Always put a brackets when you have a negative value. So we have negative 121 over 144 equals 0. To figure out the value of x, so I will have to move this part to this part so that I have plus 121 over 144. This part is settled. So I have x minus 7 over 12 equals to 121 over 144. And then the next thing that I will move that will be a square. When I move here, that will be a square root. So I have x minus 7 over 12 square root 121 over 144 plus minus. Okay, so you will have plus minus 11 over 12. I write this up because it's a beautiful fraction. It's a rational number. Okay, what else can we do? Okay, we will figure out the value for x. So we go on. Plus and minus, there will be two answers. So you will have 7 over 12 plus 11 over 12 and 7 over 12 minus 11 over 12. Okay, what do we have? We have 18 over 12, 3 over 2, and then negative 4 over 12, negative 1 over 3. That will be the answer. Okay, so few things I want to go through with you, remind you again. Always making sure your quadratic equation is in general form. So in this case, it's in general form. This as well, you see, ax squared plus bx plus c. I think only this. This is not in general form because it's not arranged nicely. So make sure you arrange accordingly. Ax squared plus bx plus c so that you know which are the a and b and c value, the coefficients. Okay, after you have arranged it in right spots, making sure a equals to 1. If your a is not 1, make sure you divide it by a certain value. Okay, make sure the coefficient term is to 1. So I divided by 6, so my a equals to 1. And step number 3, in between bx and c, right after x, in this case, you put in plus b over 2 square minus b over 2 square. So this is putting in something and taking it out so that it's balanced. And b over 2. If in this case b is negative 7 over 6, so it will be complicated if you put negative 7 over 6 divided by 2 over 2. It will be complicated. So I rather you write, just remember it's just half of the value. So it is the same as negative 7 over 6 divided by 2, half of the value. And I now have the half of the value, I have negative 7 over 12, and then a square minus itself. And the first three terms, we are doing a factorization, turning it into a perfect square. It's always start with the unknown. In this case, it's x. X followed by what's written in the brackets, x minus 7 over 12. And then at the back, everything here, you calculate with your calculator. And then you have an answer here and bring it over to the other sides. And then square, you bring the other side, you have square roots, and then you figure out. And there will be two answers. Okay, thank you.